Marfell's Beach, March 2021. Shell build up behind the old mussel bed after the uplift. Newly forming sand hills. Bit of recreational access with education signage. The sand hills are building here all of the time. Marfell's Beach. Here we have the shag colony and the macrocarpa tree. It's where they roost each night. You see them out on Mussel Point during the day. With access signage blocking access to the beach from quad bikes, encouraging people not to have vehicles on the beach in front of the camp. These are all newly forming sand hills out on the beach. After the uplift, there's been a lot of sand movement, and it's gone from a surf beach with pea gravel to a big sandy beach. These are the newly forming sand dunes. The spinifex out there, the sprayed off marram. I think the council sprayed the marram off. The old surf beach line was about where we're standing here. Under this is the old pea gravel that you used to see here. This was a filleting table that we used pre-earthquake. It used to come up to well over your waist. It doesn't come up that much past your ankle now. beach. This area has been fenced off as an experiment. Forming dunes down here. This is the code of conduct that was signed by about 250 beach users about 2.5–3 years ago in an effort to help minimise the impact. This is the basis of RAwE, Recreational Access with education of people on the beach, and 250 people signed that code and agreed to abide by it. About 15 months ago, everyone used to drive through over on the old surf beach line. The tide used to come right in under that cliff over there, and since the uplift, all of this area in here and all of these rocks out here that used to be under the water at high tide, and a lot of it even at low tide, is high and dry. So Recreational Access with education put in a few logs and a bit of driftwood to encourage people to use a new surf beach line. This track that we're on now was formed by seashells from all of the shellfish that died that was on these rocks washing in here. It took a couple of years for it to happen, and once we started driving on it, it firmed into quite a firm track, and today all of the walkers use it, everyone uses it, and it's keeping the vehicle and human impact on this area to a minimum and allowing regeneration and plants to take a hold, birds and what have you. When the earthquake first happened, it wasn't possible to drive out here. What we're driving on here was pretty much exactly like the rocks we see out there. They came in and there was rock buried under what we're driving on at the moment. These Nios weren't here before the earthquake. This was all underwater at high tide. and at low, some of it. The birds have spread the seed of the RAwE. 30 years ago there was no RAwE here. It's all been planted originally, and then it's been spread by birds. The tide was right in here last night. This is fresh weed from last night. We've got walkers coming around the track. They would have been walking around to the lighthouse. It's quite a popular walk. How are you? Hi. It's blowing northerly in here today. This is the old surf beach, and the rock we've just come through was where the tide used to chop you off at high tide. More RAwE signage, a caution to four-wheel drive ute drivers and informing about the tide. It hasn't taken long for the RAwEs to start appearing. Obviously there's been quite a good seed set this year, so hopefully the birds will spread a lot more of it around. The other thing you see in here is wild silverbeet. It was brought in by a local farmer. These rocks are mainly papa, and once they uplifted, the sun's dried them out, they crack and erode away. Eventually this will be sand. Where we're driving now was rocks, just like out here to the left. And this is just the shell that's built up here on the big seas. This is Mussel Point that we're coming up upon, and apparently this is the site of one of the dotterel nesting sites. I had a look over there about 3 weeks ago and couldn't see too much evidence of a dotterel having nested there, but maybe they did it a wee while ago. Hi. This is all the sea shell and the broken up papa. Bit later in the day. Normally you come out here and you'll see shags, oyster catchers and seagulls roosting and resting on the beach here. Our code of conduct encourages people to travel between the high and the mid tide. It's an area of the beach that has the minimum amount of biodiversity. Most of the shellfish are further down the beach. The sand hills are forming down here too. As they are all the way around the coast. It's Tuesday the 2nd of March. I've only passed 4 walkers, and there's only one other vehicle user other than myself on the beach today, as evidenced by the wheel track in front. The lighthouse on on Cape Campbell in the background. As you can see, the tide blocks you off all through here. It's hard up under this cliff at high tide. This is a big slip that came down in the earthquake, and the sea eats it away each tide. You can't get through here on high tide because the sea is up against that cliff. Comes right in here, right up to the cliff. The beach we've been on thus far is very firm. Vehicles don't have problems in this area. Last night the sea was right up in this weed here. The Marine Department is painting the lighthouse. It's got scaffolding around it. Sea was right up in here last night. This is all fresh weed. We're coming up to Cape Campbell now. Human and vehicle traffic. They really move when you drive past. There's quite a few of them here, 1, 2, probably 50 or 60 of them here. We're on the south side of the lighthouse. Most of the traffic that comes round here, vehicular or walking, only goes as far as the lighthouse. and other than that it's cray fishermen setting their pots or divers coming round on quad bikes, and some people in four-wheel drive trucks. Beach changes all the time. There's quite a bit of weed coming in the northerly. This coast south of the lighthouse is very good for diving, cray fishing, spear fishing. See the pamilla mats up on the farmer's paddock up there, the green dots in the sand. This is the farmer's boundary fence right here. By and large, most people are keeping out of the sand dunes and not disturbing any of the wildlife. We've encouraged this with a few signs and markers to encourage people to stay lower on the beach. Our existing code of conduct includes a warning to stay out of the rock pools or any marine growth. This is the papa that's flaking off these rocks in the sun. This is what we're driving over now. It's chipped off the rocks that have been exposed, and it's filling in all the gaps on the reef, smothering a lot of what was here. It won't be until it degrades totally and sand takes over the area that it will improve. Weed is washed in last night. The old beach line was up in the sand over here where the pea gravel is. The marram here has turned up since the earthquake uplift. That marram wasn't there pre-earthquake. Airstrip now. Another vehicle sign encouraging people to stay below the high. Most vehicles and quads that come round here only go as far as here. So the further we go round, the less vehicular traffic or any traffic there is. Weld cone in the distance. On a bike or a vehicle you can get as far as the Chancet rocks, which is just south of Long Point, which is north of RAwE Beach. The tide comes right up in here under this big gravel bank. These rocks are gradually wearing away, the sun's eroding them, they chip, that papa chip fills in the hollows between the rocks and washes up on the upper extremities of the tide, mixes in with the gravel that's there and firms it up. Where we're driving through now used to be rocks like those. But what's been eroding off the rocks is washed in here by the sea and it's firmed it up, so we're really driving on top of old rocks. This used to be all covered in kelp. All those rocks were covered in kelp. There's a wee bit of salt bush forming here. We're trying to keep vehicles off all of that and below it. And it's just evolving. As things are changing, we can shift where we go and have even less impact on the environment. Beach line up there where the gravel is, the sea used to go right up to the marram in there. These are what the locals call the shark tooth rocks. They're obviously made of something slightly harder than the papa, but even they're papa I think, but they're harder and they're eroding away. Was in here last night. We're coming up to Canterbury Gully. It's the farmer's paddock with his sheep. That's the Campbell road, the private road to the lighthouse. See, he's been in here last night. This is where there were some photographs in the paper a month ago with wheel marks, but as you can see, the tide comes in and takes them all away. This is Canterbury Gully we're coming up to. Recreational access with education. I've put these pegs around here to encourage vehicles not to go high on this area. It's only been lately that it's firmed up enough here to do this. The path is chipping off these rocks and it's mixing in with the sand and firming it up. And it will continue to firm up as those rocks weather, and where we're driving now will become very firm and easy to drive on. This is about the last place before you get right down to Long Point that you will see a vehicle mark on the beach, because from here on the tide takes it out every tide. This is Canterbury Gully. It's a private hut on the farmer's land. A lot of what was disputed around here with vehicles in the sand is up above this terrace right here. This is where most of the controversy was, but vehicles don't even go up there, and they don't need to. This is what the beaches are like. The next point is called the Boo Boo. It's where the Boo Boo stream comes out. There's pine nut plantation growing through here. You can see them on the skyline. And from here right to the Boo Boo and pretty well all the way to Long Point is beach like this. There's not even evidence of a vehicle being here, as all evidence was wiped out by the tide last night. And today I'm the only vehicle travelling on this beach this far south. There's very little traffic on this beach. It basically gets a higher concentration at Easter and the long weekends and around Christmas, and from now on there'll be very little, a wee bit at Easter. During the week at the moment there's probably only 4 vehicles or 4 quad bikes coming along, and they're probably not even coming this far down. There's certainly no evidence of a bike being through here, but having said that, the tide would have taken it away last night. Flax is growing on the seaward faces. The odd track coming down through the farmland to the beach. up plantation just there. They look like they're growing quite well. The old surf line was right up by those nyos. Those tree trunks were put up there pre-earthquake. This seaweed was pushed in last night. This is the Boo Boo stream coming out here. This area used to be all rock in here, and there's probably 3 metres of sand built up in this area. This used to be a lagoon that we're driving on now. Pre-earthquake you would be swimming through here. There's very little vehicular traffic comes down this far. It was all rock, much like what's here, right under where we are now. You used to swim out through the guts in these rocks and they would be at least 2 metres deep, and now they've just totally filled in. There's not even, the old channels are under the sand that we're driving upon. I don't think we'll go any further today. That's looking down over lows, panning round to the high point. There is the quarry above the Chancet, and the long low point out here to the left, that's Long Point, and just beyond that the next promontory is the Chancet Rocks. And that's the natural barrier that stops anyone or any vehicles, anything other than walking, from crossing through to the Ward Beach area. spinifex grass is forming in the new sand dunes up here. You can see the spinifex growing down out of the marram. Continually changing. Sometimes you'll see lots of birds flying around and visible. Sometimes when you turn around and come back into the sun, they show up more. But there never used to be such a lot of beach here. Since the uplift, the winners have been the birds and the lizards and the spiders, and the losers have been the powers, the crayfish and the fish and the kelp. The sea is recovering. There's quite a lot of macrocystis growing since the uplift. It's come back. See the kelp in there. Used to just be gravel beach, no marram or spinifex at all. Through here was a surf beach, and the surf used to go up to where that fence line is. Can't see any problems with low ground pressure vehicles accessing this area. They're doing less damage than humans on foot. And the fact that there's very few of them, it's not like other places in New Zealand where there are hundreds of vehicles and cars on beaches. Around here was probably lucky to be 50 a year down this far. And you see all of the marram, that was never there. Some of the new sand dunes have also got spinifex in them. The sea used to go right to the cliff there. This is Long Point. Where all that marram is are newly formed sand dunes. A lot of sand moves in this area. The sea comes in, dumps the weed, then the sand collects in it. But further over here you can see the fine sand that's collected in these sand dunes here. They were not here pre-earthquake. None of these sand dunes here. This is all newly formed. It's all through here down to Long Point. Some of the fences leave a bit to be desired. Stock on all this farmland, and some of it gets on the beach. All marram on this piece. But that sand hill would have to be 2 metres high. There's lots got a bit of size on. You're not seeing chicks around. Where we're driving now used to be rock like this, and there's just sand built up all over the top of it. Same processes are at work here, where all the uplift happened. A lot of the rocks are still papa or softer, and they're eroding away and been filling in the gaps between the rocks, and with the uplift and more sand it's filling in too. It's mixing in with the pea gravel from the old surf beach that used to be here, and that will probably gradually disappear as it is taken over by sand. The tide comes right in here. This was previously covered in bull kelp. It took about 2.5 years for it to all rot, and once it rotted, the rock underneath that it was attached to is degrading in the sun. Lime quarry, or the old quarry at the Chancet, and in the distance that's the Chancet rocks. Back when the salt works was being formed, they got a lot of rock out of this quarry to form the edges of the ponds at Lake Grasmere for the salt works. There used to be a road that came in round the face over there. Part of it's still there actually. There's a batch below the quarry. Well, it's not below the quarry, it's slightly further towards the Chancet rocks. There's only a few places around here that there are shellfish in the beach. On the Voluntary River end of the beach, to the the northern or northwestern end, there's quite a lot of surf comes in there and it churns the gravel, and shellfish can't hold in the beach there. Any shellfish that turn up on the beach there have generally come up in stormier weather from deeper water. As you can see, unless you've come down here on a quad bike or a four-wheel drive, you're not going to see this whole area. It's too far to walk. I've probably seen more of it than most because I've been down here a lot. I've dived the area extensively and I'm still around here a lot. The rock formations here at Long Point are unique to this part of the coast. You don't see it further north. They're obviously a harder type of rock, and All these rocks used to have the bull kelp on it, like the same as what you can see in the sea now. It's still there, but this was an extensive area of it. We've still got a shellfish ban imposed here. They're proposing to lift it in October for commercial and possibly recreational use. Yeah. It's certainly a very scenic part of the country. The contrast of the dry hills around here in the summer. One of the bigger risk factors in areas like this is actually fire to all wildlife. There has been fire in this area before, but there's a video in the old Marlborough pictorial, or a picture of the whole of the Cape Campbell area is black from a fire that went through there. I think it was late 60s. So around that point over there, which was the Chancet rocks, you see Ward Beach. There's a newly formed surf break at Ward Beach now. You possibly won't see the batch on the hill up there. It blends in reasonably well. But this lime quarry would probably be the most distinctive around here. You can see it from miles away at seaward, with all of the benches that have been put in it to quarry the rock. It's disused these days. The limestone country down here is quite amazing for the visual aspect of it, and there are a lot of unique plants that grow in the limestone. Further north there's less limestone. The hard limestone rock starts basically at the Chancet and heads south to the Needles. There's a spinifex tumbleweed blowing along the beach. That's why it repopulates so well. When it blows, they just blow in the wind, and they hang up in the sand and repopulate it and stabilise the sand. This is heading down towards the Chancet rocks. The tide was through in here last night. When there's a bit of a roll on, it gets further up and deposits the weed and kelp further up the beach. Driving on now is the eroded beach rock. It's been pushed in here with the tide.